On today's Locked On Giants podcast, Zach Seyko, host of Locked On Nittany Lions, joins us as we talk about Theo Johnson, fourth round draft pick of the New York Giants. That's coming your way next here on the Locked On Giants podcast.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Today's episode of the Locked On Giants podcast is brought to you by Monopoly Go. I admit it, I have a competitive side, and it's a big fan of Monopoly Go, the mobile hit twist on the classic Monopoly. So join your friends and download Monopoly Go, now free on the App Store and on Google Play. Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, credentialed member of the New York Giants media for Locked On, as well as for Giants Country over on the SI Fan Nation Network. You can find my written work at si.com/NFL/Giants. And a special welcome on into my everydayers, my Blue Crew community members, my newcomers, and everybody in between. Thank you for spending part of your time with us here on the Locked On Giants podcast. And if you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe to the channel, like the video, and click the little notification bell so that anytime I post a new video, you get word right away. And on today's Locked On Giants podcast, we are continuing our look at the New York Giants 6-member class of 2024. And today we're going to take a look at tight end Theo Johnson from Penn State. And who better to come on and tell us all about him than Zach Seyko? He is the host of the Locked On Nittany Lions podcast here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Zach, welcome on into the podcast.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you for the invite.
Glad to have you on. And Zach, let's talk about this big, promising tight end. And now, I know right off the bat, a lot of people are going to look at his production in college, and they're going to say, he's got the tool set, he's got the size, he's got everything you could possibly want. Where was the production? What can you tell us about that?
As far as the production goes, I mean, it was a crowded tight end room. Penn State always had tight end prospects that were just in the way of each other. So they had to kind of divvy up those results. And over the past couple of years, they've been more of a run-heavy team with the running backs that they've had. So Theo Johnson's just kind of by nature wasn't the focal point in the offense because there were so many mouths to feed, cooks in the kitchen, right? So on top of dealing with injuries in 2022 and 2023, I mean, he was behind Brenton Strange at one point, who ended up being a second-round tight end for the Jacksonville Jaguars, then split reps with Tyler Warren. And Theo Johnson still led the team, or tied for the lead in touchdowns and receiving touchdowns. So I think that speaks for itself. So the yardage and the receptions aren't necessarily there because Penn State was a run-first team. But then when they got down to the red zone, they were looking his way more often than not, I would say, since he was tied for the team total lead in receiving touchdowns.
All right, let's back up a little bit then with his game. What is the strength of his game? And is he primarily an inline tight end? Did they move him around? How did they deploy him in that offense?
He's a Y as opposed to an H. So he's not a blocking tight end. I don't think the Giants drafted him with the purpose of having him as an additional blocker. If they did, then this isn't the correct match. But I would trust in the front office what Brian Dable's been around Penn State quite a bit. Like, he's been there at games scouting for this purpose. So they don't take Theo Johnson if they don't know what they're doing or what they haven't seen on the field here, right? So Johnson's going to be your receiver. I mean, he's a unicorn. Theo Johnson's a unicorn. This is a 6'6" receiver, 260 pounds, and he runs a 4.6. How often do you find that combination of size and speed in general, even with the NFL? So Theo Johnson's a matchup nightmare for linebackers because he is too fast for them to cover him. And then for safeties, or if they try to put another defensive back on him, because he's too tall. So if the Giants can find a way to kind of ease him in, and I think, Darren Waller can be a nice teacher, that Theo Johnson has a good start, like a good landing spot for his career with what he already possesses as a physical player.
Where is Theo best at? Is he best against zone coverage or man coverage, or can he do both?
He can do both. I think Theo Johnson, I mean, you're going to get somebody that is, from a personal standpoint, one of the smartest people in the locker room. You're also going to get somebody that's going to go out of his way for his teammates, so he's not selfish. If you've listened, I have interviews from the season up on the Locked On Nittany Lions YouTube channel. If anybody of the from Locked On Giants wants to go check that out, you can just see just the way he carries himself, the way he speaks about his coaching staff, his teammates, that he's going to do whatever the team needs for him as far as action. So that goes along with all these intangibles that he has, that he's smart, that he can read zone coverage, that he knows what to look for when a defensive back is in man coverage, right? So he's able to kind of dissect that. So he's a smart player. He will do what's necessary, whether that's quick screens or long. I would say that he can beat you up the seam. He really can. Again, that speed goes a long way. So if everyone thinks like just get it to him and let him rumble and bumble, no, you can try to throw it to him over the top on a 9 route.
He also, I saw a stat that he was pretty proficient with the contested catch attempts. What can you say about that part of his game?
Yeah, I mean, the 7 touchdowns in the season, tied for the team lead, speaks for itself, right? Because that's in close quarters. You get down into the red zone, there's not a lot of space. There's not as much space to maneuver, and he doesn't haul in 7 touchdowns by accident, right? Those are contested. That catch in traffic is going to be very important. That's what you need as a tight end, because the bigger they are, the harder they fall. So you need a tight end with flypaper hands. He's very good at hauling in receptions. I don't question. The only thing I really question about Theo Johnson is him as a blocker, whether that's technique or something, or just off the line of scrimmage. He hasn't been a very good blocker. So if the Giants keep him away from, use his skill set as a receiver, then things are going to go very well for Johnson and the Giants.
What about his route tree? I mean, obviously as a tight end, they have a certain route tree that they run.
Mhm.
How was he at that? Was there any particular route? You mentioned he would be proficient going up the seam, but was there anything in particular that kind of jumped out about his game for the route tree?
I mean, anything that he can do, short, intermediate, long range, right? That's the thing. He's not a tight end that's boxed in. You can ask him to do drag routes, slants. You can line him up out wide. You can line him in the slot, right? I think that's where he's so unique, is that you can do other things. You can do so many different things in the receiving game with him. And it's very similar to what Darren Waller can do. That's why I said this is such an ideal match, because you just need someone. I'm not saying Darren Waller's on his way out the door. I wouldn't know that, since I don't follow the New York Giants as closely. But what I do know, watching him through his NFL career when he was with the Raiders, then moved to the Giants, like, these are just two similar type of players, where Waller can almost pass that baton to Johnson, or at least get him a head start in his NFL career.
How is Johnson with yards after the catch?
I mean, amazing. Right? All the things I've said kind of, back that up. The 4'6", or the 4.640 time, right? Being able to, and being 260 pounds, like, he's going to carry defenders if they do in fact catch up to him. So he's going to be very difficult to bring down.
And let's just briefly. I mean, we know the blocking is not his forte per se, but what part of his game as a receiver do you feel he can still polish up a little bit more?
I mean, I would say that just anything overall, right? Anything in the, you can always be better a little bit at running routes, whether that and catching, right? Being sure. I would say just being knowledgeable of the playbook, and because there is a reason he fell to the 4th round, which I thought was interesting. I mean, he put up record combine metrics, which I thought was going to put him into the conversation for an early 2nd round day 2 pick. And it didn't. He slid to the 4th round for a reason. So if that's something that they said, hey, it's production related or something like that, I would say just being a little more efficient, because the production wasn't there. I know Brenton Strange, Tyler Warren, those guys. Tyler Warren's going to be a future high draft pick when it comes to tight ends in next year's cycle. And Brenton Strange was a 2nd round pick in his own right. So he's had to share the room with them at all times. So just being a little more consistent, showing up, not necessarily disappearing. So being more active, and rather than being an afterthought, forcing defenses to say, we got to focus on Theo Johnson, and not let him say like, oh, well, the Giants have other people we need to cover. I would say being one of those players that can take the attention of defenses is probably the biggest thing that he would need to work on.
Do you think he fell because of the production, or do you think there was something else?
I mean, a lot of things can happen in terms of, conversations, interviews. There, sometimes general managers are the way. And what I'm picking up on is that scouts will ask a certain question. They say like, "Hey, this is something that really, I guess, matters when we're evaluating a player." And if he doesn't necessarily answer that, there were plenty of Penn State prospects that fell over draft weekend that just made absolutely no sense. Curtis Jacobs, for example, was supposed to be a third, fourth round pick and ended up being went unselected. So Johnson, depending on who he talked to, might have had good interviews. I don't want to say bad interviews, right? He's a great individual. But if there was one or two questions that he might not have known, I think those conversations just kind of they stick with scouts and they almost create a bias, if you will. And but the Giants, like I said, he kind of lands in their lap in the fourth round. Like you just get somebody who has all the potential in the world. It's just a matter of putting it together, but it's not really lacking anything that says like, "Hey, this is going to be a long term, like take 4 or 5 years before it finally clicks." He's in an ideal situation where he can be that high potential prospect.
Is he a physical enough player to beat a jam?
I would say so. I think he's good at getting off the line of scrimmage. Again, the size, the numbers speak for itself. At 6'6", 260, right? That's hard to press, right? What do you do to guard that in the slot? Do you put a 5'10" defensive back on him? Well, you keep up with the speed, but then you can't jam him at the line of scrimmage. Then you put a linebacker on him. Okay, you get that first punch defensively, and then he's going to get by you with the 4.6 speed. So the only players that I can think of being able to cover those kinds of guys, and he's out of the NFL, are the Cam Chancellors that are 6'3", 6'4". They're safeties that you can almost play anywhere. Not a lot of those types of players exist across the NFL at any point in time, right? So it's hard to neutralize a player like Theo Johnson. That's why I think just understanding the playbook, how he can be a consistent playmaker, is the only thing that would hold him back because he has all the gifts that you need.
All right, coming up next, we're going to talk about some of Theo Johnson's intangibles. So don't go anywhere, Giant fans. Hey, Giant fans, it's playoff time in the NBA and NHL. Baseball is in full swing, and FanDuel is your place to bet on every game. And as a New York Rangers fan, I'm really liking the odds of them going deep into this year's Stanley Cup playoffs. And speaking of odds, there's no better time than now to get involved with all the action sports has to offer. Right now, when you sign up for a new account with FanDuel, you will get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 win or lose. Bet on everything from slap shots to hat tricks to home runs to slam dunks, all on an app that is safe, secure, and easy to use. So what are you waiting for? Visit fanduel.com/lockedon today and make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, with special guest Zach Seyko. He is the host of Locked On Nittany Lions. We are talking Theo Johnson, the Giants' fourth round draft pick in the 2024 draft. And Zach, let's talk a little bit about the intangibles that Theo Johnson brings to the Giants locker room. And let's start off by what kind of a player, what kind of a person is he?
He's a leader. I think he's somebody that he's a thinker. He's not going to be somebody that's easily confused or anything like that. He was a captain for Penn State, and he's certainly led by example, right? This is somebody who puts his brothers first, puts the team first. So you're, like I said, you're getting an incredible individual who's smart, selfless, and is willing to learn, he's not going to come in with a big ego, overinflated, that's going to say, "I know better than Darren Waller. I know better than what the offensive coordinator is trying to call. I know better than what Daniel Jones wants to run or what he sees as opposed to what I see." He takes all of that into consideration. And then again, he was a leader, but he's also a student at the same time. So now when you go from college to the NFL, right, it's any time you move up, you are down at the end of at the bottom of the totem pole again. So Theo Johnson isn't, well, I was a captain last year, so what do you got? He's humble to the point of like I said, it would shock me if he doesn't become a regular starter. All pro and consistent Pro Bowler is tough to project, right? I would like that as a Penn State talk show host for him and just in getting to know him. But Theo Johnson, I can't I can't not envision a career where he isn't a consistent starter and relied on, and a I don't know about a focal point because, like, right, the future's there with Malik Neighbors. Neighbors is very good and it was selected in the top 10 for a reason. But I don't know why he couldn't be a second or third option in this Giants offense for the next 5, who knows, maybe a decade.
Yeah, especially with Darren Waller contemplating retirement, and
Mhm.
the feeling is he's probably gonna retire. But, I wanna go back to Theo's blocking. You mentioned that's not really his forte, but can he do enough, though, just to kinda get in the way, slow a guy down? I'm not saying just stonewall a guy, but
Mhm.
just kind of interfere, if you will.
I mean, he's okay at it, right? Just don't let at Penn State, at least for the most part. I would say, other than Brenton Strange, like Brenton Strange was a wrecking ball, but in turn, and Pat Fryermuth was pretty good at it too. But then Tyler Warren, Theo Johnson, Mike Gesicki, all these other receiving tight ends, like that's what they were used for the receiving game, and that's okay. So he's not totally abysmal when it comes to blocking. Just be almost the and again, the Giants know this. Dable's not going to scheme something up. Hey, we got a counter trap going the other way, and Theo Johnson's going to be the lead blocker. That's not what you use him for. Again, you create mismatches. You use him in the red zone. Can he block long enough to, on a 3rd and 3 where they don't want to be as predictable and run the ball, or down at the goal line? Yes, you can. It's just not his best attribute. And I would say, again, focus on the receiving. Let him be almost just like a fourth, or to start his rookie season. Let him be that 4th or 5th receiving option behind. Again, I know that the Giants have a lot of different receivers that they can go to, but they need that lead one. He can be another complement. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if he had. I know Darren Waller's there too, right? But if Waller misses a game or so and it opens up some opportunities for Johnson, I wouldn't be surprised if Johnson has 4 or 5 touchdowns in his first season with the Giants.
Would be nice if they could get that kind of production. I think Waller
Yeah, out of a
only had
rookie.
something like 1 last year because of injuries and whatnot. But Zach, let me ask you this. I mean, I know Penn State is a pretty big environment. I mean, they love their football out there in Happy Valley and whatnot.
Mhm.
But compared to New York is just, it's a huge market. I think we all can agree.
Yeah.
It's like the number 1, number 2 media market in the world. There's going to be a lot of press covering the rookie minicamp, covering the team and whatnot. How does Theo Johnson stand up to, such a big spotlight, even though it might not be necessarily on him per se, just the glare that comes with, the New York market? How do you think he'll do with that?
Again, he was a captain. I don't think he's not the showboating type of player that's going to. So yes, I know the New York media is different. It's a different type of beast. It's a different type of animal. I totally understand that, but it's not going to be like the. He would never find himself in terms of a tabloid headline. I will bring the Jets into this, right? Aaron Rodgers kind of generates a lot of those headlines and stuff, and then Zach Wilson, right, got kind of that negative media attention. I don't know. I think Theo Johnson, he's under, like, again, he leads by example, but he's also doesn't have that inflated ego, that negative personality that's going to draw negative media attention to him. Is he going to be criticized? Probably, right? Any pro team has criticism from radio hosts, talk show hosts like ourselves, and anything across the board, whether written or TV, audio, etc. But Theo Johnson, I think, is secure enough in himself that if he's going, like, he's been criticized before. I've criticized him on my show. Other people have criticized him going through the draft process, saying, "Hey, where's the production? Are you really that good? You don't deserve, the combine numbers are a fluke because you can't do it in college, right?" So he's heard all of that, and he doesn't seem pretty shaken up by it. So, like, a person that has the confidence, isn't afraid, is humble enough to say, I need to be the student once again. I don't see anything that leads me to believe that Johnson is going to, be a media distraction. If there's any implication of that, put that to rest. Johnson will not be will be the furthest thing from a distraction.
All right, we've got more coming up with Zach Seyko about Theo Johnson coming up right after this. Hey, Giant fans, we've all been there, either as a player or as a fan. It's halftime and the scoreboard is not looking good. You're feeling low and you're not sure if your team can pull out a win. That's when you dig deep, lift your head up, and say to yourself, time to get back in the game, pull off some bank heists, and take as much of my friends' money as I possibly can. That's right. The smash hit mobile game Monopoly Go lets you compete with your friends to get the most riches and the biggest empire. It's the Monopoly you love, but on your phone anytime with tons of new twists, including leaderboards to compare your progress with your buddies. And there's so much to do. You can play on countless dynamic Monopoly boards, make your friends bankrupt by smashing their landmarks with a wrecking ball, and even charge other players rent for your iconic properties. You can even work with your friends to crack open community chests and in tournaments to get extra rewards and climb the leaderboard. So get back out there, put your game face on, and download Monopoly Go, now free on the App Store or on Google Play. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm Patricia Traina with Zach Seyko. He is the host of Locked On Nittany Lions. Zach, you've been talking about the kind of player that, or person that Theo Johnson is.
Mhm.
What kind of, like off the field, is he soft spoken? Is he intellect? Is he,
Mhm.
rowdy? What's he like off the field?
Yeah, I can reaffirm that. I think the way that, again, he's conducting himself in interviews, he's not, again, he's not a big mouth, right? He doesn't have a large ego. All the things that I've kind of said throughout the show that I've sprinkled in about, hey, how can we combine the, off the field smarts with the on the field production and the physical traits, right? The soft skills that he has what led him to be a captain. Okay, so he's veteran minded, right? You're getting an older mind. You're getting an older soul in a 22, 23-year-old right away in his rookie career. Theo Johnson didn't have to stay at Penn State for another season. He could have gone into the NFL draft. He probably wouldn't have been selected as high, right? I imagine maybe a 6th or 7th round pick probably factored into that. So another year helped him learn some things, be that captain, be that leader, and it just the selflessness. Theo Johnson could have made it about me, me, me. Hey, where's my draft stock? This is hurting, the production's hurting my draft status. Who knows what those conversations could have been like if he was, a selfish player. Okay. But it was about when you just listen to him. I encourage people to go check out those interviews. I all The way that he spoke about James Franklin, his head coach, candidly, and everything that he said that he's done for me as a person, as a human being, the things that he's done for my teammates. Theo Johnson almost came back to be that bridge from his class to the next group of players that would have been those juniors and seniors, those veterans. That's what meant more to Theo Johnson rather than, oh, how many touchdowns am I going to catch? How many yards am I going to put up? Right? Am I going to be the leading receiver on this Penn State team? It seemed like it meant more going to battle with his brothers and being one of the first people in line to lead that battalion mattered more to him than all the receptions, receiving yards, and touchdowns he could ever accumulate.
Zach, like any rookie, I mean, every rookie, you can make this case regardless of where he's drafted.
Mhm.
There's going to be something that needs to be polished. We know, you have told us that Theo's game is not block as a blocker,
Mhm.
that he's more of a receiver. That being said, what do you feel he needs to show between the time he gets in the door starting next week when he comes in for rookie minicamp on May 10th to the start of the season? What does he need to show the coaches as far as the biggest area, that the biggest jump he can make?
Show up, be consistent. Can you be a number one tight end? Because it's always been tight end by committee. Okay, so yes, the production isn't concerning from does he lack the talent, right? Was he just an afterthought? But can you handle the increased workload? He started all 13 games. It's not like he missed time, right? Penn State ran a lot of two tight end sets. But can you be the guy? Because the Giants aren't going to always run two tight end sets. What is life after Darren Waller? Because that's why Theo Johnson was selected. Whether Waller's there for another season, 2 seasons, right? We'll see what New York can actually get out of him at the tail end of his career. But when Darren Waller isn't there and you are tight end number one, if everything leads, if the blueprint is to be just that, can you do that? Or do you have to be overshadowed by a Brenton Strange? Do you have to split a timeshare with a Tyler Warren? Do you need another complimentary tight end to succeed? And I think that's what he needs to prove. Can he show progress? Can he get better 1% every day? And almost, I don't think that's the case. I'm not implying that's the case, but he needs to prove that. He needs to prove that. I can be the best Theo Johnson I can be without a tight end A or a tight end B. I can be tight end number 1 and nobody else needs to supplement me. I can be that go-to guy at that spot.
And then finally, I like to always kind of get an angle, something
Mhm.
off the field, an interest or something that maybe isn't as well known outside of the college community, who the person is, whether it be an interest in, I don't know, a charity or whatnot. So what's something you can tell me about Theo that might make for a nice angle for a story?
I'm not entirely sure about personal interest. I think the journey that he's had. I think he's a Canadian born, right? He's very when and I think he, like I said, he's just very secure in himself. He knows who he is. I think just kind of, looking at his background, looking at his journey, how he decided to go to Penn State, of all places, right? Being over the the northern border, right? So I don't know as far as, like, hey, what does he like to do in his time? What charities is he contributing to? But Theo Johnson in himself, like, is going to be a good person, a good soul, and a guy that is going to sacrifice for the better of the team. You're going to get somebody that is going to be a rookie from simply just being a first year player in the NFL. But I think you're going to find as you speak to him and as the coaches start to answer questions about him, when they start to get those first questions, hey, how is he doing in minicamp? A lot of times you are going to get conversations about who he is, just being a person and the way that he learns. They'll probably describe him as a sponge. They'll probably describe him as somebody that's, hey, he's vocal. Even though he's not a leader in this year's team, we see that he could be that down the road. So I think that's when you talk about Theo Johnson, those are a lot of the conversations that you're going to have.
Sounds like a really interesting prospect. I can't wait to see him. I can't wait to meet him. Sounds like he's going to be a great addition to this Giants offense.
Mhm.
Zach, thank you so much for coming on the Locked On Giants podcast to share a little bit about Theo Johnson. I mean, look, you can't buy this type of information, folks. These are the folks, these college hosts are the ones who know their teams inside and out, and they do such a great job. So please, if you're a Penn State fan, or even if you're not a Penn State fan, check out Locked On Nittany Lions, hosted by Zach Seyko. That's going to do it for this edition of the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Traina. Giant fans, keep it here all week. We will have much, much more coming up, including coverage of the rookie minicamp, which again starts on Friday, goes into Saturday. So I will be there and I'll have everything you need to know and then some. For Zach Seyko, I'm Patricia Traina, and we'll talk to you soon, Giant fans.